Well, thanks for joining us today, Lynn. Okay, there's been a storm of attention put on the weight room here at the women's tournament. What can we tell people about what the issue was and how you've resolved it?
Well, I'll start with your second question first, which is we fixed it. The issue around the weight room came about as we became aware that there was a difference between what was being provided to our women's basketball student athletes here at our championship versus what was provided at the men's championship in Indianapolis. So once we became aware, we immediately started working to rectify the issue, and as I said, we fixed it.
I think people at home are like, why didn't they know? Why didn't you at the NCAA know what was going on at the men's? How much were you communicating with each other?
We communicate with the men's staff. I mean, we actually, our staffs normally, when we aren't in a pandemic, we sit in the same area at the office. You know, there certainly were some challenges this year, given the fact we were working remotely and everything, and there's been communication. But in this case, that was an issue that was not communicated amongst the staffs.
So you said you fixed it. There's been some other issues that we've seen on social media. So talk to us about, the food. People said there was a food issue, but how have you addressed that quickly?
In the case of both the men's and women's basketball championships, with the hotels where our teams are, there, in all cases, it is the same, that teams are, through the contract, would get 2 meals each day from the hotel, and then 1 meal essentially be on their own, of which food could be delivered and then through contactless transfer over to the teams. Here in San Antonio, as I said, it was the same issue, and people not necessarily liking the food or the hotel food. Frankly, I don't like the hotel food, and I'm eating the same stuff every day. So I think some of it is just us, that we may be picky eaters. But one of the things we've done here is that we've continued to work with our San Antonio local organizing committee, and they had already we already had set up a program that teams, when if they wanted to order that food to be delivered to the hotels, that they had a list of restaurants, and they actually had virtual team hosts. All 64 teams have an individual from the community that would help them source that and even get it to the hotel. But when we heard that there were some additional food concerns, the San Antonio community has stepped up and even expanded that program for our teams.
Yeah, every team I've talked to said as soon as there was an issue brought up about the food, it was addressed, and that they are very happy from top to bottom. So I think we knew in a short planning period in a pandemic there were going to be issues. What have you guys done, and what are you proud of that you've had to quickly resolve these things in order to get it solved?
Yeah, certainly the weight room issue is one that was very prevalent. And as I said, we fixed it. Addressing concerns around food and where we can make those adjustments to help our teams, we fixed that. There were some concerns with our teams about their ability to go outside. And within the controlled environment, that's something, in order to maintain that environment, we have to be really cognizant of. We do have the benefit here in San Antonio that the climate is much different than it is Indianapolis. And with the concerns, what we were able to do is work with the local police department and others to then develop a corridor walk, if you will, between the hotels that teams are able to go out. And in order to maintain the controlled environment, that now is staffed to make sure that the parameters related to our medical protocols are still maintained. So we did that, and that was executed yesterday.
So I think, we don't want to say social media drives the world, but there has been a lot of outcry, is the perception of the men getting something that the women aren't getting. What are you at the NCAA doing to make sure that the women are getting the same opportunities and that there is equity?
This is women in sport and women's basketball and in many other aspects of our lives. We've been fighting uphill battles for years. In a lot of ways, this is no different, in the sense that we have to be diligent, and we have responsibilities as leaders to make sure that there are equitable and the opportunities for our student athletes, so that they really have the best experience possible. In the case this year, that was a miss. That was a communication operational miss. There are other things for women in sport that are bigger systemic issues that I have devoted my career to, and there's many others that have been fighting these battles. And we will continue to do that, so that the women, whether it's women's basketball or any other sport, get the attention that they deserve. So at the NCAA, we are committed to supporting our women in sport. And where there are those issues, we are going to address them. And I'm going to continue to fight those battles to make sure that happens.
Are some of these conversations that you're going to have with your very own bosses? You know, is there a situation within the NCAA that you need to go and say, hey, listen, this, and this, we've got to get this fixed?
Yes. And as I said, you know, that's happened. That's the world we live in many ways. And I think it's important personally that we acknowledge that those situations exist. I experienced some of the same type of different experiences and treatments even when I was a student athlete and played basketball back in the early 90s. And we've made tremendous progress. Our student athletes, their experiences continue to grow and be enhanced, but we're not done. So for those that have now see some of the issues and the challenges and the battles that we've been fighting, my message to them is join us, support us. Our student athletes deserve that. And we want you to watch women's basketball. We want you to come to the games. And we are moving forward.
Yeah, get on board. I don't want to see the social media outrage. I want to see people buy tickets and support women in real life, not on social media. That's one of the things we can do. The other question I have for you is there's, we see the numbers. It says the NCAA will make $1 billion. What is the reality of the budget that you have to work with?
The resources and how they are allocated at the NCAA, in order to have our Division I championship, there's certainly the resources that are devoted to it. There are ways we can be better across the board in how we execute these events. And being a membership organization and having to be good stewards of our organization's money, those are conversations that need to take place even beyond the walls of the office. And those are with other leaders in college athletics.
So we've talked about the weight room, the food. Something else that's come up is the antigen versus PCR testing. And I know you're not a medical person and you don't want to speak about all the scientific reasons, but there's this idea that maybe it's not fair to have women doing one versus the men doing another. What's the reality of that situation?
The testing protocols that are associated with our championships across the board, the NCAA worked with its COVID-19 medical advisory panel, which is made up of a variety of medical experts, including infectious disease experts. And they developed a program that would be implemented at our championships relative to the tests themselves that would be administered. Then for each championship, and I'll of course use the case of here, women's basketball in San Antonio, we also then have to work with the local health authorities, the officials, and they have to essentially approve or sign off on what those protocols are. That does include what the testing protocols are. So in another city, another site, there may be some differences, and in some cases those may be attributed to what the local health authorities prefer.
So after all of this and what's happened in the media the last several days, what have you guys learned as an organization that you can do better moving forward?
There's a lot of things that we learned, and as an organization, I think what happened these past couple days is that it did pull the curtain back on some of the issues surrounding our sport. As I said, the weight room issue I would attribute more to being a miss in the operational aspect of the championship. But what that opened up is a conversation about where there may be disparities between women's sports and men's sports, maybe our championships in the bigger conversation. I'm actually happy that this conversation has opened itself up, and I think it is really important for us to continue that conversation so that we can continue to move forward and make some differences that'll support our sport. And I would be remiss if I didn't also note that there are a lot of successes that we've had in women's basketball over the last decades, but also in particular the last several years. And those are attributed to a lot of great leadership within our sport. This year, for example, for the first time, and this was planned last year, but our championship got canceled when our Final Four, and we were supposed to be in New Orleans. For the first time, all of our 63 games are going to be broadcasted nationally. If a viewer wants to change what they're watching, they simply have to change the channel. Since 1995, we have not had any of our games on a broadcast network. We have 6 this year. We have sold out 7 of the last 8 women's Final Fours. We have been making progress, and we are going to continue to make progress. In some cases, it may be a little slower, there may be some twists and turns, but we are not going to stop, and we're going to keep fighting to do what's right for our student athletes in our sport.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.